Hello, everyone. I'm Keith Clark, editor of ProSound Web and Live Sound International, and welcome to How to Upgrade Your Dante Network, a webinar presented by Audinate and Yamaha here on ProSound Web. As we've seen over the past several years, Dante networking has proliferated pro audio, and now with Dante AV, the video landscape as well. In the next 50 minutes or so, Kieran Walsh, Audinate's Applications Engineering Director, and Andy Cooper, Pro Audio Application Engineering Manager at Yamaha's R&D Center in the UK, will touch on a brief history of Audinate and review Yamaha's Dante product catalog. That will be followed by video in which Andy will interview Steve Simmons, who's the technical director at Perimeter Church located in Atlanta, where he will show how Dante has been used to solve many of his networking challenges. Kieran and Andy will conclude with a detailed dive into networking and, more specifically, Dante Domain Manager. And if we have time remaining, we'll answer questions that come up during the webinar. So sit back and take it away, Kieran and Andy.
Okay, so we've got a jam-packed 40 minutes ahead of us, Kieran, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
I'm going to let you begin by talking us through what Audinate has to offer with the Dante hardware and software available, and after that I'll follow you with letting everyone know what Dante products Yamaha makes, that support Dante Domain Manager.
Absolutely.
And then we shall introduce our guest from the Perimeter Church in Atlanta. So Kieran, over to you about Audinate.
So, a brief introduction to Audinate. Audinate are an Australian company which are headquartered in Sydney, Australia. Audinate started in 2006 as a spin-out from the then National ICT of Australia, and ever since we've been developing the Dante solution. Now, Audinate are predominantly network engineers and computer scientists primarily, and we're concerned with the idea of creating a fully 100% interoperable solution for all manufacturers of audio and video equipment. What that means is that anything with the Dante logo on it connects to anything else with the Dante logo on it. Now, the way we do this is we make all of the Dante technology and we supply hardware modules to manufacturers to incorporate into their products so that you can connect Dante together easily. And we also supply the manufacturers with development tools. So, as you may have seen on many of the Yamaha products, you can control Dante channels from the mixing console, so you don't need a laptop. But we also make a load of software products as well. So you may be familiar with the Dante controller, which is our simple plug-and-play system. You plug device into the network, they're discovered, and you can do simple one-click signal routing to connect the devices together. We also make the Dante Virtual Sound Card, which is a way of bringing audio into and out of any kind of operating system audio environment. And we also make the Dante VIA. Dante VIA is there to take audio resources from a system, connect them together either inside the system or across the Dante network, and Dante VIA allows you to connect anything together. And an exciting development we've had more recently is the Dante Domain Manager. As networks get bigger, more and more people wish to use them, you have more and more devices, so things start to creep in, like needing security to stop people making accidental mishaps, and Dante Domain Manager can really help you to avoid those kind of things, and it also allows you to analyze what happened in the past should anything go wrong, or you could improve your working practices by just looking at how people work with the network.
Yeah, this is a really key thing, isn't it? And we're going to focus a little more later on Dante Domain Manager and what benefits it can bring.
Absolutely, yes. It gives people a really good way of working in a much larger and more complex ecosystem with safety and the comfort that they can know what's going on.
Yeah, fabulous.
So we also make some other products. More recently, we talked about the Dante AV solution. This on the left here. This is a module that is going to be able to put video onto a gigabit network alongside the audio. So we're targeting this at kind of transmitting high quality 4K video across a normal network. We also are looking at some software based solutions. So we have the Dante embedded platform. This allows us to approach many more applications. It allows us to retrofit it into things like DSPs and also into generic pieces of hardware to really help get the next generation of Dante products together. And of course we provide the Dante AVIO adapters, which are there to allow simple connection to older analog and legacy systems to bring those into the Dante network at a low price point as well.
Yeah, fabulous. And they're becoming more and more popular, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
For all kinds of purposes, yeah. From USB out of a computer to plugging straight into an amplifier, or even straight out of some musical instruments.
Yeah, and one of the most popular things, of course, to add the analog outputs to existing powered monitors and Dante enable your entire ecosystem, like the local cafe here that have a load of them downstairs on the standard computer network. It helps them have a really, really flexible working environment for music and for speeches just at the click of a button.
Yeah, wonderful problem solvers. Okay, thank you, Kieran. Let's take a look at a bunch of the Yamaha products now that support Dante Domain Manager. So this will take a couple of minutes because there's probably more than many would have imagined at first. Let's start then with the Yamaha CL series, because this really kicked off Yamaha's use with Dante. So these were the first digital mixers that have Dante actually embedded inside them. So we've got the CL5, the 3 and the 1. 3 different sizes with different channel counts. And then they have a sister product called the QL series, the QL5 and the QL1. So these are more of an all-in-one mixer with analog inputs and outputs built in, but also with Dante modules, so you can expand through the network. And you can expand using these devices, the R series I/O racks. There's 4 different sizes here, different input and output configurations, but they all now support Dante Domain Manager. Also, in the R series, we have the RMIO 64D and the RSIO 64D. So the RMIO is a Dante to MADI converter. The RSIO is a Dante to anything converter. There's 4 card slots in the back, and you can choose any audio format, analog or digital, to interface there. And there's a sample rate converter for each card, so that's a real good problem-solving device. And more recently, we've got the RD2 series. Nothing to do with Star Wars, I promise. So 32 in and 16 in options there. And one little secret about these, actually, they have a lower latency than the original R series. So they have some advantages in upgrading your live sound system. And are designed to work perfectly with the Rivage PM systems that have this HY144D card. And yes, this can handle 144 channels in and out at 96 kilohertz. So this is Yamaha's most powerful Dante module. Then to the smallest mixers, and the TF series also support Dante Domain Manager. The 3 versions, the TF1, 3 and 5, and the TF rack, and the little TIO 1608D interface. So that family is all Dante Domain Manager ready. Now if you've got some older Yamaha digital mixers, you can make them DDM ready by putting in this card, the Dante MY16. The AUD2 is the current version of the card, and that will give you Dante Domain Manager compatibility. Then there's a few more products. This one, the MRX7D, and its sister, the MTX5D, both have Dante interfaces. They are rack mount matrix processors used for installations, maybe background music systems or speech announcement systems, used in a whole variety of hospitality and entertainment applications. And there's also a little microphone, the PGM1, that is Dante Domain Manager compatible. Then there's a range of amplifiers that work well with those, 4-channel and 8-channel amplifiers, 2 different power ratings that support Dante Domain Manager. And there's a new series of amplifiers, the PC series. For all 4-channel, you can choose either 600 watts or you can choose 1200 watts per channel into 4 or 8 ohms. And then we mentioned powered speakers earlier. These powered speakers have a Dante module inside them, so they are compatible, the DZR series and the DXS XLF subwoofers. So we can have Dante right to the powered speaker. Then we're almost finished the list. We have another powered speaker, but this time a column speaker. So this has 16 1-inch drivers in it, and using power over Ethernet, we can have Dante in there, and the amplifier is inside the same box as the column speaker. Then we have this one, the MMP1. So this is a studio monitor management system. And this also uses Dante in and out, so you can use it in your studio to manage multiple speaker setups, multiple headphone listenings, and fallback for the studio, and so on. And then lastly, Yamaha makes a bunch of network switches. Now we know that there's no special requirement, is there, Kieran, for switches to be used with Dante? But these ones Yamaha makes to, I guess, for sound engineers who don't have so much IT experience.
Absolutely.
They can quickly make use of these and have some, or use some of the benefits that managed switches can give you without needing to learn so much about how to create VLANs and trunks and so on.
Absolutely. The whole purpose of connecting stuff across the network is so that you do not have to be a network engineer. That's why Audinate exists, to deal with the connection of different devices together. Inevitably, it has to go into a network layer where you might have switches and routers, and having something that you know works just out of the box can be a massive advantage. It allows you to get on with your real job of being a sound engineer and not having to be a network engineer as well.
Right, yeah. And still for Dante Domain Manager, there's still no special requirement, is there, for network switches?
No, not at all. It's just, as far as we see it, it's normal Dante, and you just plug and play and connect and click away. Dante Domain Manager, in its ideal implementation, would be an aid to the network, not a blocker.
Yeah.
And anything that can help people have a good customer experience, indeed these switches are very good to just work out of the box and work with Dante. Of course, you can do more complex stuff in enterprise IT, absolutely, but that would take specialist knowledge. This takes away that initial hurdle and allows people to get going and experience what the benefits of media networking are, and not have to worry too much about the network side of it.
Indeed, yeah. Okay, well, that's enough of a rundown of all those products. Let's now meet our guest for today. And a couple of months ago, I had a wonderful trip to Atlanta, Georgia, in the USA. And on the edge of the town is the Perimeter Church. And I spoke with their technical director, Steve Simmons, about his campus-wide network of using lots and lots of Dante products. Let's hear from that now. So today, right now, I am in the Perimeter Church in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's a wonderful privilege to visit here, and I'm with Steve, the technical director. Steve, thanks for joining us.
That's an honor to be invited. Thank you.
Yeah, there's so much going on here, even today. Could you give us a quick idea of what happens at the Perimeter Church?
Sure. So we're located in Johns Creek. We've been around about 40 years, and we have about a 400,000 square foot facility. We have 10 auditoriums here, and we have 280 ministries that function inside the four walls of the church. And so with all of that, there's always something going on. So right now we actually have about 1,000 kids here for camp. And so they're running around. So if you hear noises in the background, that's certainly going to be that's what that is, yeah.
And how many staff do you have looking after audio?
So I have 6 in my department. The music department here also has 3 other guys that are full-time that do that as well. And then we use an army of contractors, an army of volunteers. And then we also try to work through staff. We have a value here of God's people using God's gifts for God's glory. So we're always trying to find a way to leverage someone, train them up, raise them up, teach them, and deploy them out there. So, because no one cares more about that ministry than those that are already kind of connected and engaged there. So that's kind of our first choice. And then we move into contractors or staff like myself.
Yeah. Fabulous. And with the CL and QL consoles, of course, comes Dante Network.
That's right.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you set up your Dante network around the campus?
So with 10 auditoriums, we set each auditorium up as kind of its own kind of isolated network. But we networked it in such a way that when we need one auditorium to talk to another, we just simply change a little setting in a switch, and we're able to pass that audio right through. So for example, if you have Easter or Christmas overflow, we may throw it in another room, but we have the capability that they can actually mix all 64 Dante channels in another room from the sources that are being generated in here.
Yeah.
So that was huge for us. It also allowed us to connect with a myriad of third-party people, such as our Shure wireless microphones. They're all
Yep.
connected via Dante. They're easily integrated and controlled right from here. You've got
Yep.
battery metering. You've got RF quality. You've got receiver gain control. All of that built right into the desk. That's almost a game changer. Just that alone allowed our noise floor. When you start bringing up multiple microphones, the noise floor, it just became so much cleaner when we were able to go all digital and control that via the integration here.
Right.
That was pretty fantastic. We're also using it to distribute music. For example, the walk-in, walk-out music that's pre-recorded, all of that is distributed all throughout our campus via Dante. But we also have the ability to interrupt that and source it from this desk or from our studio desk or from any number of places.
Yeah. And this isn't the only console in this room, is it?
That's right.
So
So we have a CL5 here at front of house. We also have a CL5 at Monitor World back there on stage. And also kind of part of what we consider this room is the studio where we're doing the live stream.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And they're all sharing control of the same RIO units for the mic
right.
preamps on stage, yes?
That's right. Yes, we've liked the gain compensation. I'm sorry, the kind of features on here for head amp sharing. But
Yeah.
I really found a different way to do it. I just said,
Yeah, tell us
guys,
how.
if we all want the same thing, right? We want maximum signal without clipping, right? So let's establish what we're going to say is our target input level, and that was about -18 for us in our applications with the dynamics we were seeing on stage. Maybe a little louder for vocalists and things like that don't have quite the dynamics. And now we've done that, and so for the last 12 years, we've actually done it where all 3 digital desks can just share one preamp, and it just eliminates a lot of confusion. Just makes it really, really easy just to say, hey, I'm going to build my monitor mixes around a -18 input level.
Yeah.
I'm going to build my front of house mix around a -18. And I'm going to build my studio mix around a
Yeah.
-18.
Fabulous. And you've got plenty of headroom,
Tons of headroom, yes.
and each desk has its own digital gain, so you can make little adjustments without
Absolutely.
affecting the other guys, yeah? So,
We have a soft-spoken pastor sometimes, and so when he's up there, it's not uncommon for me on the broadcast side where I want it to be a more consistent level. For people watching on iPhones and things like that, I may grab that
Yeah.
digital gain once in a while.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
So, also using Dante, you do some live recording,
That's right.
yes?
So we
And-
record via the Nuendo integration that you guys
okay.
have there. We obviously do virtual sound check in each of our rooms around here. So
Right.
that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah. Another great way Dante helps you, yeah?
Makes it easy. Makes it
One
easy.
cable, so many channels.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So, another thing you make great use of in the console, I believe, is the Dugan Auto Mixer.
Oh,
Yeah. Tell us how that has
So
revolutionized
so
your mixing.
so it's already. I mean, I actually have probably done broadcasts for TV for probably 25 years, and even despite that, when you have a multiple open microphones up there, just getting the noise floor where you want it to be, making sure you don't miss even the first part of a word. It's the Dugan Auto Mixer. It's just without equal.
Mm.
Threw that thing on there, and everything is clean. You never miss a word. In fact, leveraging volunteers, we do in this room and also in a couple other rooms. We'll have school plays. We have a school here as well, and they may use 16 or 18 microphones, something like that. So we'll throw the first 16 on the Dan Dugan and just let it do its thing. And the volunteers can run it without feedback. It's nice and clean. On the broadcast side, if I know there's going to be more than 2 people on the stage talking at the same time, I throw that thing on there. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Great to know it's volunteer friendly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if the operator of the console doesn't have the skills to fight feedback with EQ and parametrics.
It takes care of it. Just
Yeah.
make sure to send that post fader. You send that
Indeed.
pre-fader. That
Yeah.
can that's a
can
thing.
be
Set
awkward,
that post
yeah.
fader, and you can almost sit back and set it and forget it.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I can quote Ronco there.
Yeah. Then maybe another great tool would be the Rupert Neve Designs 5045. I've seen you've had some analog units
Yes.
for a while, so you've got to know those processes quite well. Describe what that does to.
Oh yeah, the primary source enhancer. We actually he was pointing that out. In each of our rooms, we have 5045s, and they're very expensive, but they're incredibly powerful. We find that we can easily get an extra 6 dB of gain before feedback on a headset.
Yeah.
And that was huge for us. But now that it's been integrated in one of the more recent updates here, just having that on the desk that I can patch has been a game changer. I was telling you, I think just this weekend they threw a Ganjo, which has a little local omnidirectional mic that just sat on it, and they set that Ganjo player right in front of the drums. I threw the 5045 on there, and it managed to isolate it perfectly, and I was able to throw it up in the mix right where it needed to be. And I couldn't have done that without a 5045. Right. In this room, just because sometimes you have soft talkers, and say you have a kid doing a school play, and you just or he's up there kind of singing something just to get that little extra gain before feedback, because maybe he's got bad mic technique or something like that. 5045 is my go-to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, one more thing to talk about, because it's staring right at us, the Stage Mix app. Tell us how that helps you.
Yeah, well, obviously one of the first things is when you're dealing with, here we leverage not just staff, we leverage not just contractors, but we're also leveraging a lot of volunteer musicians. And just being able to stand next to them and to kind of make tweaks to their ears, make tweaks to a monitor mix if they happen to have a wedge or whatever that is. Just knowing that I can stand right there with them, have a very personal connection is huge. The second big thing about it was, I was telling you, I love the little feature in here that if you go back here to kind of mixer and you go to utility, if I've got several effects here, you can link them together under multi-select, and now I've got a single button I tap, and as soon as I do that, all of my different effect units that have a tempo parameter, they're all locked in sync.
Yeah. Wonderful feature.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Then, what do you think the next step will be for the system, like with regard to Dante networking?
Right.
Of course, there's so many possibilities for expansion and so on. But what's your idea for your next step?
Well, I think leveraging something like Audinate's new Dante Domain Manager is probably going to be a big next step for us, because being able to have one place where I can go see all of my Dante devices, because our devices here are divided up by subnets, by VLANs, things like that, and to be able to span that the way we want to, but the Dante ecosystem has a solution for that. And so we're going to be able to leverage that.
Yeah. Steve, it's been wonderful talking to you and hearing your enthusiasm and wonderful experience. Thanks again for inviting us here.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
I've greatly enjoyed
Looking forward to getting a Rivage here soon too, so you guys can come back then. And,
Indeed.
And I'll have just as much passion, I'm sure.
So yeah, really friendly guys there at the Perimeter Church. It was wonderful to visit, and I remember I had one strange drink at their cafe. I think it was like blueberry-infused fizzy coffee.
Oh, wow.
On ice.
Oh, nice.
It was a really special drink. But yeah, lovely. Anyway, back to the topic, and let's remind everyone watching and listening, please submit any questions you've got, and we shall address them, as many as we can, a little bit later.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So I took a little time to kind of draw up a sort of simplified system diagram of what we have at the Perimeter Church. And this could be similar to what a lot of campus networks have. So we can see several halls or several performance areas or conference zones, each with their own set of Dante equipment and each with their own switch, but all connected centrally to one, let's say, master switch or main switch in the machine room. So you'd have a different operator in each room, but you may want to pass a few channels of audio between each hall. So it's good to have everything connected.
Well, this design's really nice because a lot of the time I see all kinds of different schematics, and this way of documenting a network is really nice because it shows us the functionality, it gives us an idea of the equipment that's being used, it gives us an idea of what the switch connections are here, and this is the absolute perfect way to start planning a Dante Domain Manager-based installation. Wireframe schematics are always difficult to read. This is very, very clear in terms of it being very easy to understand what the functions are, and gives you an idea about what kind of flexibility you want to build into a system. It's much less abstract than a mechanical drawing.
Right, yeah. And this kind of system makes it sort of easier to visualize how to expand it or
Yeah, this
how
is
to upgrade
something.
it, isn't it?
This is something that, as a sound engineer or someone looking at the function of a network, can easily understand and easily apply some imagination to.
Yeah. So in reality, many of the halls in the perimeter church have quite a few more Dante devices than we are showing here. But just for simplicity and to get the idea, this is how we've visualized it. So we'll use this as a guide when we apply Dante Domain Manager to the system later.
Absolutely.
But just to show a bit of the reality, so actually what the switch in the machine room looks like is this here. So it's quite a tower, quite a beast with all sorts of customizable ports. So clearly they used an expert IT company to install and take care of this.
And absolutely, this is a very, very nice example of one of the larger modular switches you may see in an enterprise, where you can see there's spare slots left there to add switch interfaces later on as the network grows. So this is already a very good example of how a network may expand over time.
Yeah, so easy to add more ports or more bandwidth.
Absolutely.
Yes, yeah. So kind of upgrade options then that we could have in an existing Dante networks would include getting bigger devices or more audio channels, let's say, having more devices, so
Always a good thing.
distribute audio to more places. And then you could consider, well, you could upgrade to get better reliability or easier maintenance or make your network more secure. So those three last topics, they could be handled quite well by Dante Domain Manager. So first let's discuss these, the top two, bigger or more devices. So towards the end of the video, we heard Steve say, yeah, he'd love to check out the Yamaha Rivage systems, the flagship extra large digital mixing systems. So a Dante card in these can handle 144 channels in and out at 96 kilohertz. So it's going to require a fair bit more bandwidth. Though the musicians will be happy because it reduces latency, so they get closer to real-time monitoring. So other options then, adding more devices. So the lovely Dante Avio devices that we mentioned earlier, they can be added in all sorts of places, can't they, to bring the Dante networking to the smallest endpoints, inputs and outputs.
And this is a real trend we're seeing in enterprise IT now. The Avio adapters run off power over Ethernet, and it's becoming increasingly common now to make sure that every interface in a network has PoE. Not just for Dante Avio devices, although that's a very good way of using PoE, but for telephones and for other network-attached devices that require power. There are speakers, even as Andy showed with the column speakers, that run off PoE.
Yeah.
So it's always a nice design stage to check whether you have PoE on every single interface. It saves so much time and hassle.
Yeah, yeah. So as you are considering to expand your Dante network, there's three things to consider, yes? There's more switch ports, which may mean you have to add more switches, or if you have modular switches, you can just add extra ports into the modular frame. And then more switches, yes, check. Do you need redundancy or do you wish to create redundant networks with Dante, the primary and the secondary? Do you need to add PoE? And then, if you're adding more devices, more audio channels, perhaps adding video devices in the network, then do you need to expand your bandwidth? For example, using 10 gigabit per second links from each individual switch to the main core switch.
That's one of the lovely things about IP these days. The fact is that bandwidth has become, on a per port basis, relatively inexpensive, certainly when compared with the audio devices going on the end.
Yeah.
So 10 gigabit per second has gone from maybe 5 years ago being an expensive luxury to being more or less common now when considered in proportion to the number of audio or indeed video channels you're running.
Right, yeah. And even 100 gigabit per second is possible, isn't it, through fiber?
Oh, absolutely. 100 gigabit per second is going to become more and more important for uncompressed broadcast devices going forwards in the very, very near future as well.
Yeah. So, Kieran, could you share a little advice about network topology? So, as you add more switches, you sort of need to take care, don't you?
Well, I always think of network topology and bandwidth as being very, very similar to what we've been doing all along with analog. So when I look at a power distribution system, you want to keep the amount of current available in different regions of your power system consistent, easy to understand, well documented. I could go and plug into the inlet to a building on a low current device. Of course, it would work. It wouldn't be a problem, but it's not the most efficient way of doing it. So you would structure your system for your very, very high current availability to distribute down to lower current and then eventually down to domestic mains connectors. And that's a really good parallel to think about network bandwidth. So you don't want too many layers in your hierarchy.
Yeah.
So here we've got something that's very, very typical of a normal network that we'd consider for audio. We have a core. We may or may not be crossing the core, but we have edge devices here. So they would be edge distribution points. That would be like having a good amount of current available for, say, a loudspeaker system. This is a good amount of bandwidth available for plugging all of your Dante edge devices, your mixers, your speakers, your microphones. And then you go to a high-capacity core, which can have a distribution function to get across into other edge segments as well. So very, very good idea. So maybe your core has 10 gig links down to the edges, and maybe the edges have 1 gigabit connections. Certainly for audio, that would be fine per device. And then you've got these big, heavy current trunk lines up to the core, and that gives you a lot of bandwidth to do whatever you wish. And following this kind of structure minimizes your cost and minimizes strange, difficult to understand cabling and topology issues.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And also, when it comes to musicians playing live, we should try and keep all of the equipment used for creating that live sound within a minimum number of switch ops, shouldn't we?
Absolutely. Often the best way to go is to go for switches with more interfaces on them, so that if your microphone, say, or your stage box is plugged into the same switch as your mixing console, there's very, very little chance of contention. It means you can run at much, much lower latency.
Yeah.
And then when you distribute out of it, one of the beauties of audio is that it naturally data compresses. It would be very rare for me to send a split of every single channel from one performance stage to another.
Yeah.
That's why we have mixing consoles.
Right.
In the case of the lovely Rivage things, they're very, very capable of outputting a lot of different buses, a lot of variety of mixes. Now, of course, in the main, they would go to the monitoring section locally, but you could send stems into another room, and typically those stems would be mixes of a whole bunch of channels. I wouldn't be sending 100 microphones, say, to another room. Maybe I'd send 4 or 5 stems.
Yeah, yeah.
So audio is lovely because we can mix it. It reduces our data rate. It's very, very nice for the network folks. Video, mixing video is more complicated.
Right.
If you mix 2 video signals together, it looks a bit 1970s pop video. So a lot of the time, you either create a program switch locally and then just send a single output program channel, or you may distribute stems on video, which is why video is a lot more bandwidth hungry in general than audio is.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about bandwidth a little bit now then, briefly, as you mentioned it. So it's not too difficult, is it, to calculate how much bandwidth you may require in each portion of your network by counting the number of audio channels you need and knowing the sample rate. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Here's some examples we're showing now. 4 audio channels which fit into one Dante flow at 48 kilohertz only takes up 6 megabits per second.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why we do this is because actually audio samples are very small. They're only about 3 bytes if you think of 24 bits.
Yeah.
So we put 4 channels together and multiple samples of the same channel to make sure that our network utilization is as efficient as possible.
Right. Yeah. So as we up the channel count, if you've got a 64-channel mixer, then you're likely to use up about 96 megabits per second.
Yes.
Which is less than 10% of a 1 gigabit link.
Absolutely. And the really good thing, think about looking at generators again, power and bandwidth. I keep going on about this thing, but 96 megabits per second. Okay, so it should fit into a 100 megabit per second link. But given how I would calculate power for a PA system, that's maybe a bit too close for comfort for a 100 megabit line. I'd always feel better going 10 times over on gigabit.
Yeah.
The cost difference isn't very great anymore. And I've just got that huge amount of headroom there just in case something happens.
Yeah.
Now, we work really hard with Dante to make sure we deliver this as a very predictable peak load. But, sometimes things can happen with control events. You want to make sure you've got headroom in the system. So definitely, if I'm doing 64 channels, I would certainly want to be using a gigabit interface.
Absolutely, yeah. And then when we move up to 96 channels at 96 kilohertz, we can see that uses up around 288 megabits per second. So that's how much bandwidth you should allow for those kind of channel counts.
But even then, you're only at 30% of the gigabit link. That's a very, very safe amount of headroom to have in any system. It's going to sit there, and other traffic may be next to it. It's up to you. What Domain Manager helps us with, that we'll look at later, is how we can administer the network to make sure that we're just making sure that audio is in those links and that we can exclude other traffic if we so feel that's a good idea.
Yeah. And now, earlier on, we mentioned about Dante AV, which is coming. Now,
yes.
Now, AV has quite a broad sort of bandwidth utilization, doesn't it? Depending on compression ratios and so on. So here's a few examples. So we could go from as little as 2 megabits per second in a compressed IP security camera, or we could go up to 1.5 gigabits per second if we're running uncompressed HD SDI at 720p.
Absolutely, and then at 1080p we're going to more like 3 gigabits per second,
right,
and then beyond into 60 frames per second uncompressed 4K. You're talking about 12 gigabits per second then.
Indeed you are.
Really seriously looking at 40 or 100 gigabit per second links then when you're dealing with broadcast level uncompressed cameras.
Right, yeah. So, if you are wishing to add AV to the same network as Dante, then we really need to start considering bandwidth capabilities, aren't we?
Absolutely, and that's why the case study in itself, we saw the modular switch there. It's the ideal way of using the existing cabling and maybe changing the cards to something of higher capacity.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me.
Bless you. So, upgrade options then. We have covered bigger devices and more devices by switch ports and bandwidth. Now let's consider the reliability, easy maintenance, and security. So let's move over to taking a look at Dante Domain Manager and how we would set it up for this kind of system.
Absolutely. So the first thing we're going to look at is Dante Controller. And your normal experience of Dante Controller will be that you will see a list of devices. Well, today we don't see any devices because we're actually in a different IP subnet to all of the other devices, as we can see from here. When we look at the Dante interfaces, we can see that we're in this IP subnet, and our devices are actually in different IP subnets.
Right.
The way that we access a Dante Domain Manager is we use this new special button in Dante Controller, click on here, and we log in to our Dante Domain Manager server with our username and password. Here we're the administrator for the moment. When you first set up Dante Domain Manager, you have to set up an administrator login.
Okay.
So we connect, and now we see these different devices, and we see our username here. And at the moment, we have no devices in any domains. And in fact, we can look at this list, and there are no devices there. So the first stage is for us to start to populate our different domains from the design we saw, and build the network up in such a way that we can start to create a usable multi-user interface.
Okay then.
So now we've logged into the Dante Domain Manager webpage using just a normal Chrome browser, and we can use a fully qualified domain name just like on the internet, or we could use the IP address of the Dante Domain Manager itself. So I just log in again using my username and password. And it shows us this first landing screen. Now what we're really interested in is the devices. So if we select the devices, we can see here that they've been discovered, and they're in different IP subnets. So this one's in the 201.0/24 subnet.
Okay.
And we can see there are devices that are in the different elements of our setup here. So the broadcast studio is in its own IP subnet.
Yes.
And we've kind of split the building in half. So the children's hall and the lobby and the school are off in one IP subnet.
I see.
And the main hall and the other smaller hall, I think, yes, are in another IP subnet. So this could be the kind of flat view that you would see coming into the network in kind of classic Dante mode.
Yeah. So without Dante Domain Manager, those subnets would not be able to share any audio.
Exactly, and the devices would not be able to see each other.
Right.
So what we've done here is these devices have been discovered by the Dante Domain Manager. Again, this can be done automatically or it can be done manually.
Okay.
That's an entire user choice. And now we want to create some domains to represent the different working areas we have.
Yeah.
So the simplest domain, it's only got one device in it, is the Broadcast Studio.
Yeah.
So I create a Broadcast Studio domain by just typing Broadcast Studio into the Create Domain list. This gives me a Dante domain, and then I go to my device list, and I go looking for the device that would have been in the Broadcast Studio here. We have a CL3. I grab this by clicking, and then I drop it into the Broadcast Studio, and now that device is just sitting there in a domain.
Yeah. Simple as drag and drop.
If I was sitting in the same IP subnets with Dante Controller, this device would now disappear, because now the Dante Domain Manager is in command of this device, and it will only talk to the Dante Domain Manager.
Right.
So if I had a normal Dante Controller out there without a username and password and being able to get into the Domain Manager, I'm not going to be able to accidentally take control of this device now.
So that device now has some security.
Absolutely, and it is invisible to devices that are not the Dante Domain Manager to which it's enrolled.
Okay then.
So we can carry on. We could create another main hall domain,
Yeah.
and then we just go and find the devices that are also in the main hall. So we have a ULXD here that goes in the main hall.
That's wireless microphones.
Absolutely.
For anyone who's not sure.
And the main monitor console, again, goes into the main hall.
Yeah.
And the ULXD, another one, goes into the main hall. Another set of wireless microphones. And this is a stage box.
Yeah.
And a front of house console, a CL5 in this case. Another set of radio mics. Another set of radio mics.
Yep, of course.
And another stage box.
Yeah.
And that's the 8 devices that we have in the main hall.
Yeah. Okay.
So when I go back to Dante Controller, I now go to the drop-down menu here where we have domain, and we move from unmanaged. Now look, the Broadcast Studio and the main hall have appeared.
Yeah.
Now if I click on the main hall, I see the devices that I've just put into the main hall. And if I go into the Broadcast Studio, I can see the broadcast console.
Yeah. Great.
So now we've created some separation. Now I'm going to go into fast forward mode now and create the rest of the domains for the network.
Let's do that.
Okay, so now we have all of our domains in our list. So we have our Broadcast Studio, our Children's Hall, our Lobby and Cafe, our Main Hall, School Hall, Small Hall, and Youth Hall. Small Hall and Small Hall.
Great. Yeah, so it's wonderful that all of them can be seen from the same Dante controller software. So it's a familiar user interface, isn't it?
Absolutely, that's the idea. So the day-to-day workings of Dante are still very much in the Dante controller. And the Dante Domain Manager backend is just for the administrator to set things up.
Yeah, but depending on each person's access rights, they may only be able to see one or two or a few of the domains.
So absolutely, the main thing with Dante Domain Manager is we can manage users within the domains. So let's look at how we manage that. So now we can see our different devices in the different domains, and we can now see all of the devices have been assigned because none of them are in the unmanaged domain anymore.
Right.
So as the administrator, we can look at what things the administrator can do. So we go to roles and we look at the site administrator, and unsurprisingly we can see that the site administrator can do every function that Dante Domain Manager allows.
Very good.
But there's more than just the administrator in this network. We have to manage the different users.
Yeah.
So right now we have the administrator, who's the boss, and now we have to have some more people. So of course Steve from the video is clearly the administrator of the network,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it would be sensible for him to have his own working login as well. So it's a principle of computer security that you can have a super user, but most of the time you would be doing general operator functions.
Yeah.
So let's create a username Steve. We create him a password. And of course there are password rules to follow.
Okay, yeah. Need some security. Okay, uppercase, lowercase,
Yep.
number.
And
Confirm.
confirm that. And then we've decided that his default role in every domain is to be the domain administrator. Well, actually, he should be the site administrator, really.
Yeah.
So that means now that in every domain, he's the site administrator. Well, that's very nice, but what if we have someone who's just concerned with teaching? So let's have a new user, Emma. Yes?
Okay.
And we'll give her a password. So Emma's default role is going to be none, because we want to just allow her to work in the domains we want her to and not see the other domains.
Right, okay.
So if we add her, now she will not be able to see anything. So let's give her a privilege to work in, say, the school hall, for example.
Right.
And we can decide that Emma can be the operator in this domain. So we save the changes, and if we look again at the roles mode
Yes.
and operator, we can see that Emma can configure routing, can't play with the clocking, can set the device settings up, can see what's going on with the devices in that domain, but can't manage the device enrollments, so she can't take devices out of the domain or add them, can't create new users, can't manage the overall domain settings, can't do firmware updates,
Okay.
can monitor the system status, but can't play with advanced system settings. Currently in the Dante controller panel, we're still logged in as the site administrator, so we can see all the domains. So let's log out, and now log in as Emma.
Right.
So we do that, Emma, and the password. Log in again. Now we're connected as Emma, and the only domain Emma can see is the school hall,
Yes.
and we can see that Emma is an operator inside the school hall. It tells us
Right,
up
right.
here. So now Emma can quite happily go and make subscriptions between devices in Dante Controller
Yeah.
in the normal way. And as far as Emma is concerned, that is the entire Dante network.
Yes.
Even though if I'm logged in as the administrator, I can see all of the domains.
Yeah, yeah. That's really powerful, isn't it? So you can really limit each user to a certain range of products, and you know they're not going to be able to change anything outside of their area of responsibility.
So what we have here is, when we look again and we're logged in again as the admin into the Dante Domain Manager,
Yeah.
we can go to the dashboard and we can see that there's been some activity. There have been 46 user operations.
Ah.
We can look at the audit log and we can see here that different things have been happening.
Okay.
And it can also tell us who has been doing it. So Emma has created a subscription inside Dante.
Right.
We know exactly when.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is just information. So if Emma were to come to Steve, who is the administrator, and say, Steve, it's really strange, I'm not getting the channels I wanted, we can look back into this user log here and see exactly what she's done and give her a helping hand just to manage the stuff inside her domain.
Right. Right. So the more experienced administrators can spot the less experienced guys' mistakes.
Yeah, so this
effectively.
helps to educate people and also keep the rest of the system completely safe.
Yeah. Great. Kieran, can you show us then how you can get audio from one domain to another? 'Cause that's a
Absolutely.
powerful thing in Dante Domain Manager, isn't it?
So one of the really key things with networking is it's wonderful to join things up together, but at some stage when things get busy and you have lots of users, you want to be able to divide things up into a sane and sensible manner.
Yeah.
So let's stick with the school hall. Maybe we want to send something to the broadcast. So what we can do is, if we go to the school hall where Emma's been working, we can create a shared audio group. So let's say this is the broadcast group. We can hit save. And so we've made the school hall a member of the broadcast group. And let's make the broadcast studio, strangely, a member of the broadcast group. That would make sense.
Yeah.
So we hit save. And so we go back to the school hall now, and we can decide which of these devices we want to send to the broadcast group. So we have some stage boxes, and we have the MRX7.
Yeah, the rack mount mixer. So maybe two channels from that. Let's say a main output from that.
So I want to send a mix of channels. I don't want to send the entire thing. At the moment, that's only sharing audio in the school hall, this device. So let's do selected domains and channels. And maybe we want to change the name of this. Maybe this is not something that the broadcast studio are particularly interested in as a device name. So we say this is the school hall mix.
Yeah.
And of course, we need to make sure that because these are special Linux names, they have dashes in them instead of spaces. But you can see that the Dante Domain Manager is warning me about that.
That's handy.
And now I can decide, because I have 64 channels sending from here, but I don't want to send all 64 channels. I just want to send 1 and 2. But that's not very helpful to the guy in the broadcast truck. So I can call it a left and a right. And I can name these based upon the destination domain wherever I want to send it. So now I've set this up, I can hit Save Changes. And now, when I go into Dante Controller as the administrator, let's have a look at what's happened. Back in Dante Domain Manager, I'm still logged in as Emma at the moment. Let's change that. So I log out, and I change to the administrator again. And I can see all of the domains again. So if I go now into the broadcast domain, I can now see the CL console, but I can also see this special in green virtual device, which is the feed I set up from the school hall.
So that green is indicating it's a inter-domain transmission.
It's a virtual device between domains.
Yeah.
And the nice thing with this is I can now quite happily just patch these two channels into my mixer, and I'll start receiving the audio in the normal way. Nice green ticks there.
There we go. And the names we assigned are showing right in front of us.
So this is really nice and powerful, because if I double click on the device, the only information I get are the channels that are available. I can't see anything about that device behind this alias.
Yeah.
Whereas a normal blue Dante device, obviously I can see all of the information about receive, transmit, status, latency, etc., just like a normal Dante device.
Yeah.
So this is particularly powerful if I was doing, say, a feed to the press. I could just give them the left-right, label it very, very simply for them, put them into their own domain and their different subnets, and just leave them to it, and they can't do any damage to the rest of the network by accident.
Fabulous. Now, is there a limit to how many of those domain-to-domain routes we can create?
Practically, because they're virtual devices, the options are limitless. It's only limited by the number of devices that you have inside your Dante domain.
Right. Fantastic. So you can do pretty much anything you want to do, which otherwise would only be possible by having everything in one domain, in one subnet, so keeping it all open, or you would just not be able to do those subnet to subnet routes. So yeah, this is the perfect solution, isn't it, by giving you flexibility with security.
Yeah, absolutely. So they can't go and mess around with the happily running setup in the school, but they can pick up the resources that they need in order to make those connections between different domains.
The perfect answer. Is it time to take a look at all the questions we've been receiving?
Absolutely, I think that's a very good idea.
All righty, guys. We've had several good questions come in, so let's get started. First question, can we set up a DDM on Dante networks from 2 or more countries?
So the short answer to this is yes. Different countries, maybe to use the words across big distances, because I have seen a use case where people have claimed to be sending data across two countries from the Vatican to Rome, which is technically true, but you're just crossing the street there. So we are able to synchronize different, what we call zones, to things like GPS synced clocks and transfer over great distances and do timing in a variety of ways to facilitate very long distance links. So Dante Domain Manager will handle latencies up to 40 milliseconds latency. So as long as you have a network latency below that in one direction, then Dante Domain Manager will be able to carry that information between those two places.
All righty, let's try another one here. Would setting up a group domain with all domains included allow me to pass traffic between subnets?
So that's an interesting question as well. The concept of domains and subnets are linked and separate at the same time. So what that means is a domain may contain multiple IP subnets, or a domain may be one IP subnet. They're two separate concepts. So yes, putting two devices into two different IP subnets, putting two different devices that are in different IP subnets, which are in the same domain, will allow audio to travel between those two IP subnets, between those devices.
All righty, let's try at least one more here. If a Dante unit drops audio, does the DDM log it?
Absolutely, it's one of the key things on Dante Domain Manager that keeps a complete log of everything going on. Indeed, in the video, you would have seen that there were error messages about audio in the presentation on the video.
All righty. Hey, I'm going to bring this one up because it's everybody's always concerned about latency. So here goes. When you run a console at 96K rather than 48K, its latency reduces. Will the Dante network latency also reduce at 96K?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The speed of the network is 1 gigabit per second, no matter what the speed of the audio sampling is at. So we are actually not changing the latency in the Dante network by changing the sample rate of the audio. So the Dante network is just dealing with packets. So by running at 96K, yes, you are having quicker A to D conversion, quicker D to A conversion, quicker audio processing within the DSP because its clock is running at a faster speed, but the network speed is staying the same. I hope that answers.
Mm-hmm. All righty, we'll do one more. And Jason says, here's a weird one. I have PTP/NTP dedicated network appliance that uses GPS antenna for sync, 4 Dante devices and no DDM. I often get, quote, unknown grandmaster clock, unquote. Is there a way to force Dante devices to sync to that PTP device without DDM?
Well, so in Dante Controller, if you're seeing the unknown grandmaster, you're already syncing to that clock because Dante is just a standard implementation of PTP. So in PTP version 2, without Dante Domain Manager, you just need to make sure that your priority 1 value is less than 112. In PTP1, if you have a PTP1 generator still, you could just make it the preferred master. But with PTP2, anything below priority 1 of 112 in domain 0, Dante device is set to AES67 mode will just follow it.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why it shows up as an unknown device is because it's not a Dante device, so we don't have the discovery mechanism for that PTP clock, so it says unknown device because it's not a Dante device.
Got it. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
No,
All righty. Well, it's time for us to wrap up. I would like to remind everyone that this webinar will also be available as a recording on ProSound Web within the next 48 hours. And I'd really like to thank Kieran and Andy here for all of the great information and the time they put into this and for answering the questions. And thank you, everyone out there in the audience who joined us today.